Among the three, Ling was exceptionally beautiful, always with a meticulously applied makeup that made her stand out. Despite being the oldest, she was the most attractive, and many people mistook her for an internet celebrity. Though she was simply a white-collar worker, Ling had a good job, a pleasant appearance, and a kind heart. However, she remained single without a boyfriend and often visited Nine's shop after work to chat. The two girls would have dinner together and then head home, enjoying a very close relationship. Ling, with her beauty, grace, and gentle nature, often helped Nine with the troubles in her life and work. A few months later, Nine broke up with her boyfriend. She was extremely upset during this period, locking herself in her room and crying constantly, feeling very distressed. Ling, whenever she wasn't working, would often come to comfort her, simply staying by her side and talking to her. Eventually, Nine had a good cry with Ling expressing many of her feelings, which helped her release some of the pain from the breakup. However, in the following days, although Nine's mood had somewhat improved, she was still feeling down after such a significant event. She lost interest in going to her shop and stayed at home, giving Ling the keys to her dessert shop and asking her to check in on it after work. 2 days later, Nine's emotions had mostly stabilized. It was Sunday, and she planned to return to her shop the next day to get back to work and avoid staying at home and feeling miserable. She believed that getting back to work would help her life return to normal. Suddenly, there was a knock on her door. She tried to compose herself, but before she could ask who it was, there was another series of 3 knocks. "Is anyone home? Delivery for a package," came the voice from outside. Nine thought to herself that she wasn't expecting any deliveries. She hadn't been in the mood to shop online during her breakup. She didn't want anyone to see her in such a state, so she decided to ignore it, hoping the delivery person would leave if they thought no one was home. If they called, she planned to whisper that she wasn't there and ask them to try again later. However, at that moment, Nine heard the door next door open. It was Ling's voice. "Hello, is this for 201? Is this Nine's package?" she asked, stating her own apartment number. The delivery person confirmed it was. Ling then closed her door, and shortly after there was another knock, this time on Nine's door. The delivery person asked if Nine could sign for the package. Ling agreed to take it and said she would call Nine later to let her know the package was with her. The delivery person thanked her and left. After a moment, there was another knock on Ling's door. Ling asked what was going on, and the delivery person apologized and asked if she could sign for the package. After a while, the delivery person mentioned that her pen was out of ink and asked if Ling had a pen. Ling said she did and asked the delivery person to wait. There was the sound of the door closing, but soon after, Nine heard Ling scream, followed by a series of short cries and then silence. Nine was immediately panicked. Her emotions had been fragile lately, and she hadn't been sleeping well. She felt a bit guilty for pretending not to be home. Her mind went blank for a moment. She quickly got up, quietly went to the door, and looked through the peephole, but she couldn't see anything. She was too scared to open the door and immediately thought to call the police. She quickly dialed 110. The police operator asked her what had happened. Nine was so nervous that she could barely speak coherently. She managed to explain the situation, mentioning the delivery and the screams from next door. The operator asked for her address and told her to stay where she was, not to open the door, and to protect herself until the police arrived. After hanging up, Nine was extremely anxious. She hid in the corner holding her head, not knowing how much time had passed. Suddenly, she heard another knock on the door. "Is this the apartment that called the police?" someone asked. Nine looked through the peephole again and saw that it was indeed the police. She quickly opened the door and explained the situation. The officer immediately went to the neighboring apartment and knocked, but there was no response. 9 tried calling Ling, but there was no answer. The officer quickly found the apartment manager, explained the situation, and the manager came with a spare key to open the door. When they entered, the apartment was empty. There was a pen on the floor, but Ling was nowhere to be found. 9 quickly called the other girl, Fei, who was working overtime at the office that day and had no idea what had happened. After hearing the news, Fei was also terrified and rushed back as fast as she could. Meanwhile, the police officer on the scene conducted the necessary evidence collection and investigation, then told 9 to go home and wait for further news. If there were any updates, the police would contact her. After that, the officer left. 9 returned to her apartment feeling scared and anxious. She stayed in her room, crying uncontrollably, not knowing how much time had passed, until Fei finally arrived. Fei stayed with 9 in her room, not knowing what to do, just waiting silently without eating or drinking anything. Suddenly, 9's phone rang. She answered it like she had been electrocuted. The police informed them that a female victim's body had been found in the vicinity in the evening. They asked 9 and Fei to assist in identifying the photos. Upon hearing this news, both girls broke down and cried hysterically. In a short while, the police arrived with the crime scene photos. Despite their fear, both girls clung to a glimmer of hope that the victim wasn't Ling. But when they saw the photos, there was no doubt it was Ling. 9 couldn't control her emotions and started screaming. Fei could only hold her and try to comfort her, though she herself was also terrified. 9, severely traumatized and in poor physical condition, fainted. The police quickly helped call an ambulance, and Fei went to the hospital with her. Meanwhile, the police continued to search Ling's and Fei's apartments for more clues to solve the case. Fortunately, 9's health was not severely affected. She woke up after a while at the hospital. The police then took separate statements from both girls and advised 9 to take care of herself. 9 and Fei inquired about the progress of the case. The police assured them that the suspect had been apprehended and that the case would be solved soon. There were also media reports about the incident. The culprit was identified as a former courier who had been in debt due to gambling and had resorted to robbery. The suspect confessed that his original target had been 9, as he had delivered several expensive packages to her and noticed that she often seemed to be home alone. However, when he knocked on 9's door pretending to deliver a package, he accidentally knocked on Ling's door instead. He then shifted his target to Ling. Ling died from asphyxiation, having been strangled. After 9 called the police and was waiting inside, the suspect had placed Ling's body in a cardboard box and thrown it into a drainage ditch. From that day on, 9 had nightmares almost every night, in which Ling would angrily shout at her, blaming her for what had happened. This terrified 9. Soon after, Fei moved out of the apartment and changed her phone number. 9 also closed her dessert franchise. She didn't want to stay there anymore and decided to return to her hometown Chengdu. She spent that period in great pain, hoping to find something else to do to distract herself and move on from the heartbreak. She bought many books related to desserts and started learning how to make them at home. She even attended a pastry making training course. After a while, 9's condition improved, and her nightmares became less frequent. She told her family that she planned to return to Beijing to open a store again, but this time she would create her own brand instead of joining a franchise. 9's parents asked their relative living in Beijing, 9's aunt, to help find a shop for her. The aunt found a location on Shaoyun Road, which we mentioned earlier. Soon after, 9 returned to Beijing and rented a house near her workplace on the east side of the 4th Ring Road. 9 decided to restart her own dessert shop, But perhaps because the familiar surroundings triggered painful memories, she began to dream of Ling again. For a while, she was too afraid to go home alone and stayed at her aunt's house instead. Her aunt was truly worried about her and tried all sorts of remedies, soothing porridge, sleeping pillows, foot-soaking solutions, everything she could think of, but nothing seemed to work. One evening, when Nine was staying at her aunt's house, the aunt was particularly excited. She took out a wooden box and said to Nine, "Today, a friend of mine got this Buddha amulet for me. She said it's very powerful. Although it was meant for me, I think it shouldn't matter who carries it. It can bless anyone. You should wear this. I believe it will help." Nine wasn't very convinced by such things, but she didn't want to disappoint her aunt who had good intentions. Plus, she was desperate for some relief. So she decided to wear the amulet around her neck. Later on, she met Dong. She wasn't sure if it was because of the amulet or because she had a boyfriend now. But after they started dating, she rarely had nightmares about Ling anymore. However, one day, Dong suddenly described a girl with a face that didn't exist. Nine's mind went blank. How could Dong know about that girl? They had no connection at all. Wasn't he talking about Ling? The nightmare she had barely escaped came rushing back. She was devastated. Last Wednesday, when Tia visited Nine in the hospital, Nine recounted her past experiences. Before leaving, Nine said, "If only X's uncle could take a look, that would be great. I'm really scared." Tia promised to do his best to help and told Dong to take good care of his girlfriend.